Hey, Kadam, can you hear me? Check. Okay, great. I thought this mic was broken, but I guess it's good. Okay. And then, let me re-enable my desktop. Okay, there we go. Okay. Cool. Someday everything will just work the first time. Today is not that day, but that's okay. Appreciate y'all being patient. We'll get started here shortly. Kadam, I saw you also submitted a homework. I know we got one from Cameron as well. So let me close the door here and we'll get into it. Okay. Cool. So, and I'll pull up Discord on iPad so you have a monitor, y'all. Docs. Okay. So, last week we talked about build-ups, which are a song structural element to create this rising sense of anticipation, and it tells the listener like, hey, something's about to happen, and in particular, the drop is about to happen. So today we're going to go even earlier in the song. We're going to talk about intros, and in fact, we're going to go so early on in the song that we wrap around back to the end. We're going to talk about outros. So intros and outros, how to start a song, how to end a song. These can often be kind of tricky for people because it's like, in the drop, you already have like an idea of what you're doing, where to go with things, what your main thematic elements are. But sometimes it can be difficult to start off a song or to figure out how to bring it to a conclusion. And me personally, I hate the idea of fading out at the end of a song. I know tons of tracks in the 60s and 70s, 80s do a fade out. I don't like that. We can do better than that, and we will. But to talk about intros and outros, we're going to take a little detour into the live performance aspect of EDM. So we're going to do an introduction to how to DJ using a piece of software called Mix. Basically, when you're thinking about the intro and outro for an EDM song, you might think, okay, well, in what context is this going to be performed live? How is this going to be performed live? And typically, these days, that's done within the context of a DJ set. So that gives us some clues. What about fade-ins? Have there been any songs? I guess there are tracks that gradually fade in over time. You could perform those live too. I mean, the nice thing about DJing is you're basically just pressing play at the end of the day. But before we even get into the main content of today's... True that, Kadam, true that. Before we even get into the main content of today's session, let's listen to some homework. So I know we got submissions from Kadam and from Cameron. Any last minute ones? Let me pull up the DMs here. Let's see. Where are my recent DMs? Okay, here we go. So we got Kadam's here, we got Cameron's. And the homework assignment was to add a build up to one of your tracks. So and further develop them. So why don't we start with let's start with Kadam's. I think the blue fragment was relatively short last week, so let's get a whole minute of audio here. So let's listen to Kadam's cover of Eiffel 65's Blue. Here we go. Sorry, I realized that that's caused the audio to stop. 1 second. Let's see. Sorry, let's try again. Sorry, I'm gonna start it over. All right, should be working now. Let's get into it. All right, glad to hear it's not clipping. It was showing red on my monitor here, so I wasn't sure if something was up. But that was great. I really love the whole like jazzy, loungy kind of tone you're curating there. I think that's a really interesting take on the original, which was obviously more heavily electronic and dancey. Good use of chord progressions, good use of like a chilled out sort of pad sound. I like those little those like fluttery downer sounds you added, especially at the beginning to create some release of tension and also just add a little bit more atmosphere into the mix. Good job too at the beginning, starting off with just the drums and the bass, and then introducing the chords. It's always nice to, we're going to talk more about intros, but one of the ways I approach them is to start with only, one or two elements. Let's see. Cadam says, those downers are the only actual sample from the original. Still can't figure out how to synthesize that. Fair. Yeah, I mean, it's nice when you can, it's a nice callback to bring in some of the elements used in the original track. We might have some time to show how to make that kind of like fluttery sound. We'll re-listen to your remix here. Maybe before we get into DJing, I can show how you might program that. I love the filter automation you added, like with the low pass filter to gradually like kind of shrink things down before opening up into the drop. Another really interesting thing you did at the end was use the open hi-hat as a sort of like build-up element. You have it going on every other eighth note, and then you have it going every eighth note, and then every 16th note. Not a technique I think I've heard used usually in many songs, but it can be effective. I think to push it even further, you might try adding some like volume dynamics to it, so it doesn't quite have that like drilling sort of drum machine sort of sound. But the hat sounded better on my headphones than on the stream. Right on. Yeah, the nice thing too about like fills, build-ups, transitional type sounds, that's a good time to reach into your sample library and pull out a different sound, because it will it'll stand out even more to the listener. You also did some cool things with the kick drum rhythm. You added some nice turnarounds by like kind of shifting from a 4 on the floor beat to like a UK garage sort of pattern. I thought that helped kind of emphasize the jazz lounge sort of feel you had going on. Let's listen to it again. Just see if anything else comes to mind. Let's run it back. Oh yeah, I love that kind of dreamy organ you have at the very end. I think that's a really effective way to start introducing the main theme. It sounded like you were playing the so you're having the organ as a instrument playing that the sort of main arpeggio theme. Is that delay feedback on the back of the open hat build? What do you mean, Cameron? Like using the feedback parameter on the open hat buildup, like on a delay? Also good use of bringing in the clap in your intro. You know, after setting things up with the kick and the bass, then bringing in the clap to add some more energy. That was some good arrangement there. Nice little drum fill too when you pulled out the bass right before the second kind of downer effect came in. I think you could have. I think there was room too to throw in some more like percussion or one-shot sample elements in the intro, just to add a little bit more texture, a little bit more vibe. So that could be something you could add there. But I love the idea of where you're going with it, where you like bring in the organ to start playing the melody, and you're like gradually building up the track over time. Kind of like a progressive house sort of arrangement. So really excited to see where you take this. I could totally hear a lounge cover band playing this, or like at a modern Thai restaurant playing like this sort of remix of Blue. So definitely keep it up. Let's take that organ even further. Cool. Any other comments before we move on to Cameron's track? All right. Cool. So Cameron's track is Car Lights. I'm not sure if this is based on, let's see. Maybe it's based on my car getting bumped into yesterday or on Sunday. All right, let's give this one a listen. Here we go. Very nice. Man, so many good things to say about this. First of all, I love the structure you've got going on here. Gradual build in, then good amount of energy with the kick drum coming in, setting a tone, and then nicely pulling back. Just having the claps. That's a really like great clap along moment, and just a couple intermittent kick drums here and there just to keep the beat alive. And then in the second, miniature section here, adding in another synth layer to amp up the energy and create that feeling of progression. So really nice gradual increase in intensity throughout the, kind of like build verse section, and then pulling back again, and then adding more elements again. That's a good way to keep the listener on the hook. And a really effective section right here. After you added the snare roll buildup, I could tell you have two different kinds of snares going there, and then you had that kind of like whoosh and the reverse cymbal, so that was super effective. And it's great too when you kind of leave the listener hanging up there, pulling way back after a sort of dramatic rise in energy, and then dropping it all on us right here for the end, where you bring in that sort of like wobbly kind of synth lead to add even more hype and excitement there. So really great structure, and also your choice of synths works really well together. I'm getting like forest, maybe after it's rained recently, or like a forest sort of level in a video game, maybe like Hollow Knight or something. And then too, here in the end, I could tell you kept the side chaining from the kick going, so that helped preserve some rhythm in the pad and keep it interesting, even as we're getting to the end of the track. So super vibey overall. Let's see if I could offer some constructive feedback. Well, let's listen to it again. Let me see if there's anything that comes to mind. And also, if there was a particular track or, I don't know, song, video game, movie, whatever that inspired you, drop it in the chat. But let's listen to it again. Yeah. Okay. So couple things that I think could take the track even further. So like here in this second kind of middle low key section, it could be cool to add some like additional rising kind of elements near the end. I was specifically hearing like some arpeggio, arpeggios, maybe with like a sine wave or a triangle wave. You know, something soft and not too buzzy like a saw, but where you can do some like really fast arpeggios playing the same chords, but in the upper register, maybe kind of like growing, blooming, blossoming, and creating some more background texture and creating some rising energy. Because even in these two parts where you pull back a little bit, you can make them build. You can make the second one build on the first one a little bit in its own way, and then you have this really nice kind of like back and forth, but it keeps getting higher and more filled in, and then we dramatically land in the main drop section. So I think you could add a couple more textural elements here in the second pullback part. I loved how you gradually faded things in. Maybe one thing to consider, I'm not sure how many different synths you were using. It sounded like maybe you were using your sort of angelic bell square wave pad kind of sound to play both the melody and the chords. So you might try expanding the diversity of synth tones you go for, just to create a little more disambiguation between the different parts that you play. I think you had maybe some counter melodies that got a little lost in the mix. So it might be helpful to use some different synth sounds, or for a counter melody that's more in the background, maybe have a little bit of a pluck or attack at the beginning, just so it pokes through a little bit, so you can hear it a bit better. I liked some of the percussion you had going on in this little outro section. I think some like toms, kind of like, or taiko drums, or maybe with some reverb on them, could create a cool like tribal sort of sound to add to that jungly atmosphere. So those could, and you can work those in too in these sections where the kick drum is more sparse. Maybe you have like some like kind of ongoing tom pattern or rhythm or fill interspersed in there to add it, to create like a more shamanic vibe, if you will. So just some ideas. Let's see. Awesome. Sorry, just catching up on the chat now. Love that you wrote the song from scratch. That's awesome. The synth stabs are pulled from a trick that Prince used. Ooh, I'd be curious to if there's a video, production video that, or like a song that you're drawing from. That'd be cool. Yep, same on the chord and melody. Okay. Maybe I'll before we get into the DJing part of the session, I'll show how to make one of those kind of like fluttery down sort of synths, and then I'll also kind of demonstrate what I meant by like a kind of like a fast but chill arpeggio to add some cool texture up top. So just repeating the 1 of the 5 minutes 7% gave it this fun percussive element. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna load up Ableton now and hope that the audio doesn't go haywire, but let's check it out. Also, I know we got kind of a late start today, so I'm happy to stay on 10-15 extra minutes if folks want. But okay, so let's look at how to make kind of like a fluttery 1999. Okay, I'll have to check. We've all heard 1999 by Prince, but clearly worth a closer listen. But let's if you want to follow along, let's pull up a new MIDI track and add Vital. onto it. And double checking that it's gonna play through the stream. Okay, looks like it was playing through. So, actually, let me just let's see. Okay, Fruity Loops. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so in the last class, we showed how to make a downer kind of sound with white noise. So now we're basically going to do that, but with a pitched element, and we're going to add an LFO onto the volume so that it flutters a bit. So I like to use square wave for this kind of sound. Man, people are spamming me on Telegram like crazy. Okay, I like to use a square wave kind of sound for this. So you can go to basic shapes in your waveform selector here. So so init all, and then go to the one called, or you can just search for the one called basic shapes, and then change it to a square wave here, so we get a nice kind of hollow sort of sound. Cool. And now we haven't looked at using LFOs yet, but LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. Basically, it's an oscillator much like the main three up here, except they're not really meant to play frequencies in the range of human hearing. That's why they're called low frequency oscillators. Some of them can get up into the range of hearing. Like if we switch this to seconds here, if we make this super fast, like you would be able to hear this tone 0.01. This would be 1,000 hertz, so it'd be kind of like a mid-range frequency. I think in the olden days, it was probably harder to build an oscillator that could produce a super high frequency. But anyway, for these kind of flutter sounds, you got two ways to do it. You could use a tempo synced oscillator or a free running one. But let's start with a tempo synced one. So I would set the frequency here to maybe 1/16. So it'll be like, and then we basically need it to. We want the volume to do a shape that alternates between full volume and silence to get that fluttering effect. So I'm gonna take the default. I'm gonna bend this one up all the way, so it'll have a little bit of a curve up, and then I'm gonna take the second one and bend it down. So now we've got this kind of shape, and I'll bring the level of this all the way down to 0, and then I'll put the LFO on here, and then now you should be able to hear that fluttering sound. My project tempo is set to 120, so if you want it to be even faster, maybe you set it to 30-second notes, something like that. And then now it sounds like a warning noise. Right. So to get that downer sort of sound, we're also going to make it. We're going to make the basic pitch of the oscillator go down over time. So I like to use an LFO for this as well, just so you can get really tight control over how long the down or the motion lasts. Even though it's called low frequency oscillator, you can put it in what's called envelope mode here. That way it kind of acts the same as one of these envelopes, but you can make it sync to your tempo. So you can get it to be exactly how long you want, perfectly in time with the music, without having to guess like how many seconds a measure lasts. So for a downer sound, you might, it could be anywhere 1, 2, 4 measures. I'll do 2 just so it's, so we're not sitting around here all day. But set it to 2/1. That'll be 2 measures. And then we'll just do like a simple ramp down. And then we're going to assign this to the pitch. So it goes, doo, except with the first LFO, it'll be like, So go ahead and take LFO2, put it on the pitch, the coarse pitch. It's the one on the left. So there's like a you can have like fine grain control over the pitch, or you can have it cover more octaves. That's the one we want. This one on the left. If we look at the matrix, it's called transpose here, and by default it's 48, which is 48 half steps. 48 divided by 12 is 4, so that's 4 octaves. That's usually a little, probably don't need that much, but I would say 24 is a good amount here. Okay. And now when we play it, it should go down 2 octaves. So. Or maybe you want to have it not go down quite as fast. You could do it like this. Oh, someone on Discord. Let's see. Oh no, never mind. Okay, yeah, so that's the basic idea. Sometimes you don't want quite as much super high frequencies as you would in this basic waveform, so you can always put a low pass filter on it. Maybe take the resonance out, bring this up. And of course you can always, because this is like a sort of a background element, you can put put some reverb on it to kind of push it into the background. Maybe put a little bit of delay on it to create more space and ambience. I usually like to filter out the lows and highs in a delay because kind of makes it sound more natural, or you don't want the delays taking up quite as much space in the frequency spectrum as the main sound. So maybe even put a little bit of chorus on there just to give it some width. Turn down the mix a little bit. And yeah, that's the basic idea. Maybe you want it to flutter a bit harder, so you make the silence a bit bigger of this on this LFO. Yeah, and that way too, whatever key your song's in, you can use that as your root note of this downer kind of sound, or maybe the fifth. That's also a decent option. I usually go with the root, and that way everything sounds in key. You don't have to there's plenty of sample packs that have sounds like this in them, but it's easy enough to make your own, and then you can really customize it and dial it in. So yeah, and I use this sound all the time. Sometimes I don't have the flutter effect going. I just have it I just have it kind of go down. I call it like a shooting star or comet effect. Oops, gotta give it some volume, right? Maybe you could filter it more. So yeah, and of course you could apply that to noise as well to make it flutter. Put this on it, have it flutter like this. Of course, there you'd want to also combine it with a bandpass filter to make it kind of go down in pitch over time, but same idea. And if you don't want to sync it to the tempo, you want it to be a little bit more off rhythm, maybe so it stands out a little better or doesn't clash as much with the main rhythmic elements in your track. You can switch this to seconds mode and adjust from there. That's gonna be too slow, so something like this. Yeah. So give those a shot. Lots of other ways to do it as well, but basically flutter. If you want it to flutter, put an LFO on the volume, and if you want it to go down over time, put an LFO in envelope mode on the transpose or coarse pitch tuning of your oscillator. Cool. Any questions there? if not, we can move on to this arpeggio idea. I wanted to throw at Cameron. So let's open up a new MIDI channel, or put Vital on it. And this time we're going to use a triangle wave. So this is kind of like a cross between a square and a sine wave. You know, it's got a little bit more of those odd order harmonics that make it sound kind of like hollow, video gamey, flute-y, but it's not as intense as the square wave, which is super bright and the loudest possible waveform you can have. For this, I think you could either program all those individual like arpeggio notes in your chord, or you can use the arpeggiator, which I don't think we've talked about yet. But there's an effect, a MIDI effect called the arpeggiator. Sorry, search for arpeggiator right here. And you put it in front of your synth, because what it's going to do, it's going to transform the notes that you play into arpeggios. So, and for all you Italian buffs out there, or maybe Italian non-buffs, whatever, arpeggio means harp-like. So we're going to have the arpeggiator is going to allow us to play our synth in a harp-like fashion. The basic way you use this is you'll program in some chords, you hold them down, and the arpeggiator turns them into individual notes that get played. For instance, if I'm just playing a single note here, it'll sound like this, right? And it's playing right now. It's playing eighth notes. It has a 50% gate, so this is like for the first half of the eighth note, the volume's at max, and then the second half it's at minimum. Or you could say that the note is being held for 50% of the time of 1/8 note. If I turn this up to like 100, it'll just be a steady tone with a little bit of gap. But yeah, the lower the gate setting is, the shorter your notes will be. And of course, you can automate this over time as well, so you can have it start like, very, very heavily gated, and then gradually increase the amount of gate, so it adds in more audio content over time and like creates that rising sense of energy. And of course, as with the previous example I showed, you can either tempo sync this, so it's in the same tempo as your track, or you can use the free running rate, where it's just a number of milliseconds. And this can be cool too, because you can make it gradually get faster and faster without having it jump in discrete gaps in line with the different rhythmic subdivisions of your track. So, I don't have my MIDI keyboard here, so I can't hold down the chord and, well, I'll show you with an actual chord here. So, how would you actually use this in real life? So I'll create a new MIDI clip here, and I'll just play like let's do like a major 9 chord. So in the key of C, that would be C, E, G, B, D, and then we'll drag those notes all the way out. So now I'm like the computer is holding down a chord for me, and it'll sound like arpeggios. And now you can gradually, so you can change the rate over time to make it go faster and faster, or if you want to tempo sync it, you could do it like that. And then of course, to make it extra spacey and elegant, you can add some reverb and some chorus to it. Another idea is to use the square wave shape, but heavily low pass it, so it sounds like this. Filter over time. And then Ableton comes with a bunch of different arpeggiator patterns. So if you don't like it just going, up, 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 up over and over again, you can have it do random. You can do I like this converge or diverge ones because they kind of like sound like they're bouncing around a bit. Let's listen to this. Oh, let's bring the filter back up. And then I forget what the offset parameter does, but you can also make it go higher than just, you can make it play other notes beyond just the ones that you have programmed here. So I think you do that with either, let's try steps. Yeah, I think the steps must be like the octave of it. So you can, so you could add this kind of like arpeggio element in the background of your track, Cadam, to give it, even more texture and interest. And even though the notes are being played really fast, because you've got it in the background with like some reverb, and maybe you have it, filtered a bit, it'll just add like a swirling sort of textural element that will complement the more like solidly held chords in the rest of your track. So, play around with that. I was thinking too, you could like in your track, you can in the second pullback section, you could gradually bring the rate parameter of the arpeggio up, going into the more intense, higher energy section, and it would create like a rising, rising sense of energy, kind of like this. Yeah, so play around with that idea. It can sound really wonky too if you push it too far, but it's a nice complement to a more sustained pad sound. So check it out. Okay, let's now talk about DJing. So DJing is the main way we perform EDM, though people are always finding new ways to do it. So to start, let's download a free open source piece of DJ software called Mix. I'll drop the link in the Discord here and in the chat. It's mix.org. So go ahead and install Mix. And let's see, I'm going to close Ableton for this because we're not going to need it. Mix. So once you've installed and open Mix, just let me know in the chat, in the Discord or the YouTube stream. And I'm gonna add 2 of my tracks to the Discord that we'll use to demo DJing here. Just because I don't want to play any copyrighted music that I don't own the copyright to. Let me put it that way. So let me pull that up. So yeah, go ahead and download those 2 tracks as well when you have a second. I'll just leave the how are people doing on installing Mix? Okay. Great to hear, Cameron. So let me handle these Telegram spammers real quick. Cool. MIDI mapping time. Yeah, exactly, Kevin. Yeah, so this is more fun with a controller, but for our purposes here, we'll just use keyboard and mouse. So for those who haven't DJ'd before, this might look a little overwhelming, or even if you have, Mix has its own take on the standard DJ UI, but basically we have our two decks here on the left and the right. These are what we're going to load our tracks into for playback. And then in the middle, we have this mixer section. It's got knobs for the different equalizer or EQ bands, so highs, mids, and lows. So you can adjust how loud each of those frequency bands are on your tracks. It's got these faders that let you control how loud each individual deck is. And then the most fun fader for DJing is this crossfader, which instead of having to like manually raise and lower the individual track volume sliders, you can just drag it from left to right. When it's all the way on the left, it's max volume of the left deck. In the middle, it has full volume of both decks, and then on the right, it's just playing back deck one. Down here, you have your library search function. Actually, let me move my face out of the way so you all can see that. Move that up here. So there's the library interface here, so you can search for different tracks with Control F. So you can filter out all of my tracks. And then here you have the full your full library view with all the tracks that you've searched for. And then, so those are the basic large components of the UI. If you take a track and from your library and you click and drag it and drop it onto one of the decks, it'll load it, and you'll see up here it shows the waveform of that track. And then same thing if you drag in another track, it'll show the waveform below the first one for deck 2. Cool, so that's the basics. So let's, one more thing to point out. These vertical lines, that's the beat grid. So Mix will automatically analyze your tracks to detect the key and the tempo, or BPM, and it puts a grid where it detects those hits. So it lets you mix really cleanly, which we'll get into in a second. So let's do a little bit of setup here before we get to before we go any further. Okay, just checking the chat. Cool. So go to Options and Preferences, or press Control P. And first thing you want to make sure is that you have something set up here for your main output here in the sound hardware section. If you don't have that set, you won't get any volume. And definitely check here first if you aren't getting any sound. It's got a bunch of other outputs as well. So this would let you do the thing where you route one of the decks to your headphones, but not the main output, so you can preview the next track before you mix it in. We're not going to show that today, but you could do that. And then if it's not already set, change this key lock pitch bending engine and change it to rubber band R3. So this is like the highest quality algorithm. Basically, as we're changing the tempo of our tracks, we still want them to maintain their quality, so R3 is the best. If your computer is not fast enough to handle it, of course, you can use the other algorithms. Also, I'm going to adjust my camera down one more time, put it over here. Next, we're going to look at a library. So over here in the preferences. So in this music directory section, this this is basically all the folders that Mix is going to look in for MP3s, waves, audio files on your hard drive. So wherever you're putting your music for DJing, make sure that music directory is here. I'm actually going to add a folder for the tracks for our demo today. Go. All right. And then make sure this rescan directories on startup checkbox is checked. That way, every time you start up Mix, it'll make sure you have all of your latest music there. So apply. Cool. Next, we'll look at recording. Oh, by the way, if you have a controller, you can Mix supports a lot of the popular hardware controllers out there out of the box. So if you have one, you can see if it's supported or not. So now let's look at the recording part. So also, hold on. Let me see if I can make the text here bigger because I realize it's really tiny. Let's see. Interface let me see if it makes it a little bit bigger. No, it did not. Hold on. Let me restart Mix. See if that does it. Oh, it looks like it made the entire interface larger. Okay, that's not what we want. But I'll change it back once we go through the preferences here. So anyway, in this recording section, you can set where you're like when you want to record your DJ sets, you can save them to a folder here, along with the file format and stuff. And well, now my interface is too big. Hold on, let me let me change that back. I'll have to look up how to make just the text of the menus bigger without making the entire thing enormous. All right. So as I mentioned, this is where your recordings will be stored. And if you just click this rec button here, Mix will start recording. So even if you're not playing anything, so you can save your DJ sets that way. And a couple more here for key detection. So this is, and specifically in this key notation section, if you're not very familiar with the standard way of notating keys with numbers, or sorry, with letters, and even if you are familiar, I like having this Lancelot traditional option set, or alternatively open key traditional, and these create a parallel numeric system for identifying keys, right? So in this Lancelot version, the key of A major is 11B, or sorry, yeah, 11B. The key of B minor is 10A, etc. And what's important about these numbers is that for numbers that are one next to each other, those keys are 1/5 apart. If you remember from two sessions ago, we talked about the circle of fifths in our music theory discussion. If two songs are in two keys that are a fifth apart, it means you can mix them together really smoothly, and their harmonies won't clash with each other. And this is a concept called harmonic mixing. So one way to set up your DJ sets is to make sure you're mixing between songs that are either in the same key or in a key 1/5 apart. And you can make sure, and you can tell easily if you're doing that by looking at the number system, and you can go from 6 to 7 or 12 to 1, right? So this numbering system wraps around at 12, and goes back to 1 because there's 12 keys. Yeah, in this case, 12A is C sharp minor. I assume 12B is E. Right, so also in this system, the relative major and its relative minor are the same number, so you can mix between them as well. The relative major and relative minor share all the same notes in their scale, so they're basically like the same key. You just start on a different note of the scale. So harmonic mixing and set either Lancelot traditional or open key traditional. Cool. And then one last thing to make sure is checked in this normalization setting. Make sure the apply replay gain setting is checked, and this will make sure that all of your tracks sound roughly the same at the same volume. So when you're mixing between two tracks, you won't get like huge jumps in volume. Especially too if you're still relatively new to producing, your tracks might not sound as loud as like commercially produced tracks, or maybe you're mixing tracks from wildly different musical eras, like tracks from the 70s, they couldn't make them as loud. Maybe you don't have the remastered version. So this replay gain option will help you keep everything on an even keel volume wise, and you won't have to like manually adjust the volume of tracks as you're mixing. Cool. So that's all the setup we need to do. So as I said, I posted the 2 tracks. Oh, Adam, it's manageable on stream. Was there an issue with the stream? If not, go into Discord and download those 2 tracks that I posted. Do it now, and I don't trust like that. As font size. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so download those 2 tracks. Generally, when you're DJing, you want to have MP3s, waves, FLACs. You want the actual audio file of the track that the tracks that you're gonna be DJing. There are services like Beatport do offer a plugin that let you stream their entire library into your DJ software, but Mix doesn't support that. I think Serato and maybe Tractor and others support that, but so you can do that if you're at a venue that's got a really solid internet connection. But generally, you'd want to have all of your tracks, on a thumb drive or on your laptop already, so you're not reliant on the internet working or not. You don't want the internet to go down and then your whole set is screwed up. So yeah, and you can also, you can rip the audio from YouTube, but I also wouldn't suggest that for live performances just because the quality won't be as good, even setting aside the legal issues. But, fine for practice. And, sometimes you can find acapellas on YouTube as well and use those in your DJ sets. But cool. So now let's look at, let's see what happens in a more detailed way when you load a track into the deck. So let me pull up that folder here. So I'm going to put I Don't Trust Like That in deck number 1. You can see it's doing its analysis. And boom, draws the beat grid on top. It figured out that the song's in C minor. It's got a tempo of 126, great. But one thing it didn't do right is it didn't put the beat grid on the right spots, which I can tell because I produced the track. But usually the first beat should be drawn on the very beginning of your track. So, but sometimes mix needs a little help. So we're gonna click and drag this waveform until the blue playback head lines up with that first little green tick mark there. That's where the kick drum's hitting. So I'll put that there, right on the money. And then click this Adjust Beat Grid button here. It's next to the magnet icon, and it's above the lock icon on your deck. And that way it'll redraw the beat grid, so now everything is properly lined up where the beats are hitting. Cool. Oh, Cameron asks, yeah, how does licensing work for making songs? Yeah, this does kind of get into some business questions that I don't have ready answers to. If you're DJing for your friends in someone's apartment, I wouldn't worry about it. But would be an interesting question to dig into. Cool. So now we got our beat grid in place. Let's look at some of these controls here. So obviously, play pause button is gonna play the track and then pause it if it's playing. So
I'm looking for Harry.
Pausing it. We can also control the playback speed. So this is like in traditional vinyl turntables, you can make the record deck spin faster or slower by adjusting this playback speed slider, and you can configure what its range is. It's set to 8% by default, but that sounds like this.
I'm looking for Harry. I'm looking to buy.
By the way, this is if y'all know the comedian Eric Andre, this is a remix I did of a skit of his. And furthermore, on traditional vinyl decks, when you slow down a track, it will lower the pitch of the track. That's just how audio works. If you play the same shape waveform but slower, it'll sound lower pitch. But the reason why it's not doing it for me right now is because I have this key lock button turned on. I usually like to leave it on because I want the songs to be played back in their original key because they tend to sound better that way. But if you turn off key lock and then move the slider down, you'll hear how it changes the pitch as well as the speed.
A fine automobile from him.
I just don't trust anybody like that.
Have a friendly car or one that talks.
I don't trust somebody like that.
I'm ready to buy right now.
By the way, with mix, if you right-click on any parameter, you can make it jump back to its original setting, or double-click on it. All right, so I'm going to turn the key lock back on. If you do want to change the key of your song, you can use these little arrow icons here. Sounds like that, or sounds like. Sorry, we're originally in C minor, so.
I'm looking to buy
a fine automobile from him.
I just don't trust anybody like that.
a friendly car or one that talks.
You play around that, you can kind of hear how it, like, the audio quality starts to be compromised. But if you only nudge it, 1 or 2 or 3 key half steps away from the original tempo, the original key, you should be fine. And sometimes if you really want to follow the ideas of harmonic mixing, you may need to nudge your track into a slightly different key. So good to have this in your back pocket. Cool. Right, so this is pretty much all you need to be a minimum viable DJ. Like the main skill. To me, the main skill of DJing is picking songs, so track selection. And if you've been making playlists on Spotify or YouTube or wherever, or making mixtapes, then you're already like 80 or 90% of the way there. So you could play your first track, let it go to the end, and then then start playing your track on the next deck and let it play all the way to the end. And in fact, Mix has a feature called Auto DJ where you give it a whole bunch of tracks and it will just automatically crossfade through them. I'm not sure where. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so, and you can give it different parameters for how it does the crossfade. You can tell it how long you want the crossfade to last. I don't think you're gonna get any fancy beat matching or sharp transitions or anything like this. But if you really just wanted something simple, just load all your tracks in here and then let the auto DJ go. But let's actually talk about how to how to like use the features of the software to make some interesting mixes, because that's like really where the power of DJing comes in. Like you get that one long continuous mix where the tracks are seamlessly blended into each other and they're nicely beat matched, so the rhythms from the first track flow nicely into the rhythms of the second track. So let's talk about how to use some of the controls to do that. Let me wind this back to the beginning. Cool. So for this first transition, we're gonna have both tracks. I'm gonna mix the outro of this first track into the intro of the second track, and I'm gonna do that with a crossfader, and I'm gonna make sure that the tempos of both tracks are matched. Now you could do this by bringing down the tempo of deck 1 until it matches deck 2, or bring the tempo of deck 2 up until it matches the tempo of deck 1. But since we're not in the days of vinyl anymore, we can use this feature called sync, which is very controversial because people say, oh, you're not a real DJ if you use sync. Well, not everyone says that. I don't say that. I use sync all the time. Why make it harder on yourself? I like using sync because it keeps everything nice and lined up. But to do that, you basically, once you've loaded the deck in, or loaded the track into the deck, you click the sync button. Or sorry, you click the you need to make one of the decks the leader. So click the crown icon on deck number 1, change it back to its home tempo, and then also click the sync button. Or the mix devs answered a question I had about this one time, but I don't think they answered me correctly. You click the crown icon to make the other deck also be synced to the first. So now you can see that they're both at 126. By the way, if you haven't loaded Do It Now into your second deck, go ahead and do it now. The reason I chose these two tracks is because they're at pretty similar tempos. They both have intros and outros that are easy to work with, and they're also a fifth apart, right? I Don't Trust Like That is in C minor, Do It Now is in F minor, so the principles of harmonic mixing really apply here. Checking the chats. Okay, we're good. All right. So we've got them synced, and since they're synced, another kind of like guardrail we can put up is this. We can use this quantize button, or this quantize feature. It's the magnet icon. So I like to make sure that this is turned on both decks. And what this does is it makes sure that all of your button presses line up exactly on the grid. So I think we've talked about quantizing in Ableton before to make the rhythm of a MIDI clip fall on the grid. So now we're doing the same thing but with button presses. And so with this turn on, you want to like, you can get away with pressing a button like slightly before when the beat will hit, and then mix will take care and nudge it onto the correct beat. So so for me, syncing plus quantization, that's a tight mix right there. Cool. So like I said, we're going to mix the outro of I Don't Trust Like That into the intro of Do It Now. And just so y'all can hear the kinds of, you can hear what the intros and outros sound like. You'll hear that the instrumentation is relatively sparse. We've pulled out a lot of the main elements. It's going to be mostly drums and some other, elements. And these are like really helpful, like linkages that DJs really like when they're, to make it easier to mix one track into the next. And when you're looking for tracks to DJ, I would suggest looking for ones that say extended mix, because those tend to come with the useful intros and outros. Don't get tracks that say radio edit, because they're going to be, they're just going to start right away at the hook, and you won't have anything to mix into. You might have to make your own intro in Ableton if you go that route, which I've done before. Yeah, so let me just play the outro here real quick so you know what that. Let's see, I think that starts around here.
I don't dress like that.
Yeah, so just drums. Taking the bass out of the kick drum. Yeah, so I like to think of the outro as like the credits sequence of a track. You know, you can throw in some cameos from other, like take other sounds from throughout your track and drop them into your outro as kind of like a, oh, remember this character, remember that character. And I usually like to make my outros 16 measures long. That's a good amount of time to transition between two tracks. Sometimes outros can be 32 bars long. It just kind of depends on the genre. Like some progressive tracks that you mix, or techno, you mix between two tracks over a very long period of time. But I like 16 bars as a starting point. And then let me play the intro for Do It Now so you can hear kind of what that sounds like. Kind of boring, but the point is to mix another track into this one. And you add the kick. Right, so there I started with, just like some hi-hats and some claps. And then I added in the kick drum, so building the energy. But again, not doing a whole lot because I know the DJ is gonna use that time to mix. So I don't want a whole lot of important information confusing the listener and muddying the mix. Cool. So also to make this easier, we're gonna you might have noticed these numbers here on the decks. These are called cue points. Basically, you can set markers in your track at certain important points in the song. So I like to put 8. Use cue point 8 when the outro of a song begins, so I can see it coming. So visually, I have a reminder of where the outro is. And in the days of vinyl, they would put little pieces of tape on the record itself, so they could know when it was coming. We don't have to do that anymore either. But once you set a cue point, you can then jump around to it. So let me find where the outro starts. I think it's, let's see. Play it.
I don't dress like that.
So right there. So for this transition, I'm gonna play deck 1. When it gets to cue point 8, I'm going to hit the play button on deck 2, right at the beginning. And then I'm going to start with the crossfader all the way on the left here, so it's only playing track 1. And then I'm just going to gradually bring this over as the intro and outro play over each other. I'll gradually mix into the next track. And because I've got the sync turned on and the quantize here, it'll keep everything lined up. And because both the outro and the intro are 16 measures, the first song will end right when the second song is getting into like the next phase. So I'll demonstrate that and then y'all can do it. So here we go.
I don't dress like that.
Another thing to maybe quickly point out is you may have heard in the outro for "I Don't Trust Like That." I took the bass, the low frequencies out of the kick drum in the second half of the outro, and in the second half of the intro and "Do It Now," that's when I brought in the kick. So I naturally was kind of shrinking down the sonic footprint of the first song, built into the production of it. And then similarly in the production of "Do It Now," I increase its sonic footprint throughout the intro. So the DJ doesn't even, in this case, the DJ wouldn't even need to mess around with the EQs. It'll just the songs will naturally flow into each other. And bass is kind of like the most salient of the three main frequency bands, because it's it's the foundation of the track. It's what people feel. So and when we do the second transition after y'all do this first one, I'll show you why the bass, like how taking out the bass, which we've looked at when we're producing a track to create some anticipation, how that can also be used really effectively in DJing. So go ahead and try that, basic synchronized crossfader transition. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Let me look at hot take. If you can make a good mixtape, then you're a better DJ than most of them out there. Yep. Let's see. Don't Trust Like That populated as B flat minor. Interesting. Are you sure B flat minor? Did you? I'm a little surprised that it did that. I wonder if I'm on an older. I mean, it's definitely C minor based on the track. Let's see. But Kadam says, if you have a track which doesn't have enough intro, you can loop the first couple bars and bring it in as slow as you need. Yeah, that can be done with this button here on the deck. This loop button. And I actually made a separate tutorial about how to use that one, so I'll make sure to include that with the recap email. But yeah, if you click this button, it'll play this many beats in a loop over and over again until the end of time. So it can also be a nice thing to put in either the intro, or to turn on in either the intro or the outro, so that you just have enough time to bring in the next track if you want. And I think I believe you can even tell Mix to automatically set up that loop. But I'm not sure offhand how to do that. But yeah, try doing that transition real quick. Let me drop a comment if you have any questions, or if you successfully do it, then also mention that. Give people another minute or two. Was everyone able to like set the cue point at the correct spot in I Don't Trust Like That? And were people able to also redraw the beat grid so that everything was lined up? Any issues there? Cool. Thank you, Cameron. Thanks, Kadam. Okay. All right. Thank you, Animal. Great. Let's look at a slightly fancier transition. Oh, where was the adjust beat grid button? It's right here next to the magnet icon. It looks like some vertical lines. Cool. All right, let's do a little bit more of a fancy transition. Like crossfading, it works, it's fine. Kind of sounds a little timid. You're not really taking too much advantage of the EQ controls you have here, and also for tracks that aren't already set up with the nice gradually bringing in the bass or gradually taking it out, you may need to take a more hands-on approach. So let's take a closer look at these EQ controls. So the knobs here, well, if you spin them to the left counterclockwise, we remove energy from that frequency band. So remove some of the highs, or I can increase the volume of the highs. Same with the mids and the lows. And if you click on the letter itself, this is like a kill switch for that frequency band. So you can immediately remove all of the low frequencies or immediately remove all of the mids. So we're going to use that button here in a second. Also by default, this fourth knob here is it controls the amount of whatever effect you have selected to the track. So by default, it's this dual mode filter. It's like a combination of a low pass and a high pass filter. If you spin it to the left counterclockwise, it's a low pass, and if you spin it to the right, it's a high pass. I like that. I think it's really useful for mixing because you can quickly you've got one knob to either gradually bring in the highs or gradually bring out the lows. But you might want to play around too with some of these other ones like Bit Crusher is really fun. Or the tremolo effect is cool, flanger. But for pure mixing purposes, I like the filter here. Sounds like this. So high pass, low pass. So that can be a nice way to take the lows or the highs out of a track when you're mixing. But what we're going to do here for this transition is I'm going to start, go back to the beginning. By the way, these buttons go to the beginning and the end, respectively. We're going to start Do It Now with the lows out. So we're going to have the low kill switch engaged. Great band, by the way, check them out. We're going to have the low kill switch, so there's no bass in the track. And that way we can leave the crossfader in the middle the whole time, because we're not gonna end up with too much volume overall from combining the two tracks, right? We'll have a pretty full spectrum sound from the first track, I Don't Trust Like That, but we're just gonna have the highs and the mids in the second track. Then as the outro of I Don't Trust Like That progresses, we're gradually gonna take the lows out, so it's gonna create that sense of anticipation we've talked about before when you take the kick drum out of a track. We're going to gradually bring the lows out, and that'll create that sense of anticipation. And then right at the halfway point of the drop, we'll bring the lows from Do It Now back into the mix, and it will sound really emphatic because we're keeping both tracks at full volume the whole time. So it'll be really a really assertive transition. And then one further wrinkle we'll add here is as the tracks continue to play, because Do It Now is originally at 124, not 126, I want to get it back to that tempo by the time it really is in full swing. So I'm going to gradually bring down the tempo of the track as it completes the intro. And I'm gonna press these tempo change buttons on the downbeats of the measures, so that way it'll be very transparent to the listener. Like they won't really hear the tempo adjustment that much. And I mean, changing things by 2 beats per minute isn't that much to begin with, but if you make these tempo transitions on the beat, it'll be even more seamless to the listener. So let me demonstrate all that. That was a lot of words, but here's what that sounds like. So start with the closed out. So.
Harry's Cornflakes.
I don't mess like that.
So you hear how that's like more assertive, like the break beat from Do It Now comes in at practically full volume right from the jump. So it's like it really like smacks you in the face right when the outro, the first track's playing, and that'll help keep the energy up for the people on the dance floor. It's safer to crossfade it because you won't be doing anything as overt or obvious. But if you really want like a sharp, punchy transition, doing it, I love this. I love, this is like kind of my main transition really when I'm mixing is I take the lows out of the first. Sometimes I also will start off with the highs out, so it's just the mids, and I can gradually bring the highs in and then, emphatically bring in the bass. Give that a shot. If that was confusing, I'll demonstrate again. But try this kind of more emphatic, assertive transition between the 2 tracks. And let me know if you have any questions. Give people another minute or 2. And these knobs are a lot easier to spin if you have a controller. not a keyboard and mouse. Are you able to use effects on a track like echo or delay in the software? Yes. So if you change this filter drop down here in the mixer, you can, there's an echo here, there's reverb. So those can be, I like smooth growl, that's a cool one. Side reverb high pass, some interesting effects in here. But yeah, so that can be another transition idea. Sometimes people call it echo out, like on the last hit or sound in a track, you turn on the echo and it creates this echo trail, and then you can bring in the next track whenever you want. Sounds like I'll show you what the echo sounds like. I mean,
I'm looking to buy a fine item.
or I like let's try this reverb.
Car or one that talks. I'm ready to buy right now.
So those can be other nice ways to set up a transition. Basically, like make the track kind of get more and more reverby, and then it'll end with a long reverb tail, and then you can kind of bring your next track in wherever you want. That can be a nice way if you don't have the extended mix version of your track, or if you're maybe trying to transition between two tracks that aren't really at the same tempo. You can use like a reverb to create some space and time that's not really synced to any particular tempo, and then you can just bring in the next track, right when the vocal comes in, or something like that. So, transitioning between two tracks that are at drastically different BPMs or tempos is kind of one of the most challenging transitions to set up in DJing. You either have to get creative, or you just have to accept that, hey, you're not going to be able to beat match one track into the other without drastically changing the speed. There are these tracks called DJ tools that they have a tempo transition in them. So maybe it starts off at 128 and then it speeds up to 150, and so you could use that track as a way to transition from like a house kind of tempo to a trap sort of tempo. Put that in your set. Those kind of tracks, it's a little bit harder for sync to operate properly with those, because it's not just one consistent tempo. I don't think the sync algorithms really know how to handle tempo transitions like that, so you may have to turn off sync if you're going to use a DJ tool. Hopefully that answers your question, Anmol. Was everyone able to do that transition? Any questions, or anyone getting stuck? Looks like we're down to 2 viewers. Okay. All right, so I know we got started. Oh, pretty sure both record box and virtual zones. Oh, interesting. Okay. Can we see you do it again one more time on my last? Yeah, let me show that again. I'll talk through it. That's cool, Kadam. I didn't know that. Didn't know that they could do that. So hey, the technology's evolving. All right, let me show the transition again. Switch this back to filter. Okay, so start a little bit before the outro. I'll start at the beginning here. Start with the low kill switch turned on Do It Now, and then start at the tempo of I Don't Trust Like That. I'm going to fade out the lows halfway through the drop. Then I'm going to bring in the lows from Do It Now right on the halfway point, and then adjust the tempo back down. So here we go.
I don't trust like that.
Cool. You might have heard that I missed that first kick drum hit for Do It Now because I hit the low kill switch 1 microsecond too late. So it shifted it over to the next beat. But it still sounded pretty smooth because it brought the bass in on the beat and not like halfway through it. So the quantized guardrail helped keep me in line there. Cool. So I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer if people have other questions. I was going to show some examples. Seems like a lot of Anmol asks, or it says, seems like a lot of DJing is about timing. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like while the track is playing, you're kind of just sitting there, not necessarily doing anything, maybe prepping the next track or deciding what track you want to play. Like if you can sense the crowd's energy, maybe you want to keep it at the same level, try to bring it up, bring it down, whatever. But yeah, and then there's these the moments when you're transitioning between two tracks. That's when you have to step into action and press the right buttons at the right time. Kind of like playing DDR but with a keyboard or a controller. How people create live loops or scratches without losing the beat position. So easiest way to create a loop is just to click this this loop button here. So if I want to loop here where the beat is playing. This is called beat loop in Mix. So maybe I would, if I want to create an intro or outro where there is none, I might find a place in the track that just has a measure or two of kick drum playing and just loop that, and then once I'm ready to finish playing the rest of the track, I'll turn the loop off. You can also use the cue points as a way to loop. So when you're putting together tracks for your set, I like to prepare the track in various ways I like to put cue points at key moments in the track. So maybe one where the build-up starts, another one where the drop starts, another one where the second drop is. So then I can easily find where the critical parts in the song are, and I'll understand my material better, and there won't be as much guesswork when I'm DJing. You can also manually do a loop. So let's say I put a key point here right when the kick drum comes in. Sorry, delete that. I guess that's how you set it up to automatically loop, by the way, if you have the loop turned on when you set the cue point. Anyway. So you can manually set up a loop by clicking the cue point and jumping back to where it started. Like when you press the cue point, it'll jump the playback head to where the beat is, and if you have quantize turned on, it'll keep everything in time with the beat. If you can actually drag the deck around, and it'll create kind of like scratching sort of sounds. So you can kind of simulate that in Mix. It's not quite the same sound as having like an actual needle going over the grooves. I think that tends to sound like actually scratchier, and it's hard to move fast too. So I don't have a good solution to doing that in Mix, but you can do the same thing that the DJ is doing with the needle, where they're like, and as if you have the playback going, it'll also keep the track going. So
from him.
I just don't trust anybody like that.
One that talks.
I don't trust somebody.
it's a bit harder to do. Still cool you can do that. Yeah. If you have decks that have the actual jog wheels, as they're called, it's a lot more intuitive, and it feels right, and you can do it more accurately than trying to use keyboard and mouse. So yeah. Cool. So I'm happy to show some examples of other intros and outros from my tracks. Actually, let me just show the intro for I Don't Trust Like That, and I'll show the outro for Do It Now, just so you know how those are set up. So especially with I Don't Trust Like That, because it's sampling a spoken word dialogue, I build the intro around playing through that dialogue and kind of telling the initial story of the track in the intro while the beat progresses. So I'm kind of establishing all the thematic, or a lot of the thematic material for the rest of the track in the intro. And then later when I'm like chopping up the vocal, it's all a callback to that earlier context, and the listener like has that context to go along with. So you'll hear how I gradually bring in like the kick and the bass and some other elements, and the dialogue itself progresses. So here's what that sounds like.
I'm looking for Harry.
So bass is filled without the kick. Kind of just repeating one vocal line
I'm
here.
looking for Harry.
Riser.
I'm looking to buy a fine automobile from him.
I just don't trust anybody like that.
Have a friendly car or one that talks.
I don't trust somebody like that.
I'm ready to buy right now.
Open that button.
I will not buy if you want me to get naked. I don't feel like that's appropriate.
So that kind of tells a lot of the story of the track and creates that sense of progression. I bring in I started off too with this like background percussion loop, and then in the second half of the intro, in the first half the loop has a bunch of reverb on it, so it's like really distant and in the background, and then when the energy picks up in the second half of the intro, I get rid of all the reverb, so it puts the percussion like front and center, and they're not as like dreamy and ambient. And then the outro for Do It Now, I think it starts around here. So this one's kind of more straight ahead. We maintain the 4 on the floor beat, and we gradually pull stuff out of it. So. Simple kick and bass, and that loop from the beginning. Pull stuff out. And we have that same loop in the beginning, but with a filtered kick underneath. So just gradually taking the energy out. At this point, we've played most of the song, so there's no need to
Do it now.
There's no need to like tell the listener additional things. They already, they've heard what you had to say. What else? Oh, and yeah, so I made sure to add little like risers and drum fills at the halfway point and right at the end, so it creates that turnaround and kind of keeps the energy going. And as you're mixing one track into the next, those little drum fills and turnarounds will get overlaid with what's playing in the first track, and it'll create a nice set of complex interactions together. It's really that creates those like magical moments in the transition parts where you're like kind of hearing a song you already know about in a new context. So let's see, what else do I want to mention before we adjourn? Oh yeah, I guess homework. So homework is going to be to add an intro to one of your tracks, an intro that you could DJ. 16 bars would be great. And then also add an outro. So you should do intro, a build up, a drop, and then an outro. So you can take you can take a drop that you've already made and with a build up and add an intro and outro to that. And then for bonus points, take that track and DJ it into itself. So, practice DJing by playing the outro of the track into the intro of your track. It should create like a seamless, continuous loop, right? You can load the same track into both decks, and and also try playing around with just DJing your favorite music, right? Like, we got into this hobby because we love electronic music. So practice, if you haven't DJ'd before, practice spinning your own tunes, spinning your favorite tunes and transitioning them into each other with some of the techniques we showed here. And yeah, I'll send a recap email with this. Sorry I missed it last week. Schedule got a hold of me. But yeah, any last questions or comments before we adjourn for the day? Oh yeah, thanks, Adam. I'm on a business trip next week, so no class. Gives you more time to practice and DJ and work on your tracks. But we'll be back for session number 7 on June 17th. So we got 2 more sessions. Next one's going to be about song structure, and we'll get into like some of the details of how to actually structure a track, and show a lot more examples from some of my songs. So yeah, enjoy the next 2 weeks, and I'll see you then.